We're going to focus now on picking providers, and specifically today we're going to talk about peer advice on picking providers, what some of the research resources are on how to find your agency, how to find your surrogate if they're going independently, what to look for with your clinic, what to look for with your donor, and what to look for in attorneys who are representing you. Then we're going to move on to part 2, which is going to talk. Ron has done a lot of work on creating a budget and pulling information from all different sources to really give you an idea of what the financial journey is like. And Ron's going to speak to you about that. And then AJ is going to come up at the end and tell you more about GPAP and how to apply for it, what the eligibility is, and what the application process is. So I'm going to start with Greg. Greg's going to come up and tell us about research and the selection process.
So very quickly, I'm just going to take this opportunity to pat ourselves on the back here at Men Having Babies and identify some ways in which we try to streamline this process for you of research and selecting an agency. As many of you probably know, because you're here today, we have a very strong online presence. And all of the information that you're seeing today, you've probably seen in some form on the Men Having Babies website. And so, in addition to that website, we also have regular workshops, conferences, and peer support that you can access on a monthly basis. And you can find all the details about what kinds of workshops and conferences and peer support opportunities are upcoming on our website. You can also find out a lot of information from previous conferences, for instance, through the video collection that we have online. Everything here today has been video recorded, and you can see prior conferences there as well as reviewing profiles of members of the board or members of the community who have had kids through surrogacy, as well as agencies and other organizations that we collaborate with. Many of you are probably familiar also with our rating table, and you've probably kind of scanned maybe some of the providers who are here today just to get a general sense of maybe some feedback about those agencies. So there are scores and reviews of those agencies and clinics. And it's also in the program as well. Anthony's holding that up. We also, as you know, probably have a Facebook group where you can network with other men pursuing surrogacy and also ask questions. Another resource is that online you can access a consult request form. And this is basically a way for us to connect you directly with a provider by creating kind of a one-stop shopping location online. So you can find that online and request to meet with any of the providers who are listed here today through Men Having Babies. The other thing, as you kind of maybe circulate around the providers today, we encourage you to, again, be educated consumers and ask for references and to kind of ask the questions that maybe you're reluctant to ask in a large forum like this, but to really try to get as much from today's afternoon as you can. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Ron about picking those agencies.
Just to give you a good overview, when you are looking at agencies, you want to keep in mind that there are a variety of models or formats. Agencies could potentially, if it was very linear, then there could be more limited service, full service, or even those that are providing some additional extras. So at the very least, you're talking about an agency needs to match you with a surrogate. You need to find a surrogate. You need to be able to go through the screening process with her, and at the very least, some coordination as far as making sure that everything works together with the clinic and third-party attorneys if they're involved, etc. In which case, so some of the agencies don't have an in-house lawyer, for instance, and they would be, if they're more limited service, they would be recommending one. They might not have a social worker or a psychologist, but they would be able to refer you to some. The full-service ones would theoretically have all these things, or at least some of them in-house. Now, some agencies that are more full-service purposefully don't have the lawyer or the contract be done by them, since they believe that those two functions have to be done by two separate entities. But still, the more full-service agencies will need to provide you, or at least promise to provide you, more of a hand-holding experience, more of the birth plan and everything else should be more tightly integrated into your experience. Escrow services that are often a third party would be typically in a full service, they would be part of the services they provide. Let me just say that there is possibly some correlation between whether an agency is full service or more limited and their fees, but that's not always the case, of course. So by all means, we'll talk about the budgeting and the various cost items later on, and you need to try to ascertain for yourself whether that's indeed the case. Some of the full service agencies, some that are more limited, would charge separately for items such as insurance review. We'll talk in the afternoon about whether or not insurance covers all the aspects pertaining to the pregnancy, and in some cases you're also going to be mindful of the newborn. Some of them would have a refund or guarantee plan that would be oftentimes part of a more expensive package, namely if you don't have a child. They would continue with you. That would be also the case sometimes with clinics until you have a child, or give you money back. I have yet to see a parent who walked away with his money back. So I personally am a little, suspicious of these particular extras. And as I mentioned before, some clinics, most agencies would suggest a clinic. If you ask them, some of them are more tightly integrated with a particular clinic or one or two. You want to be aware of that format and realize what the advantages and disadvantages of it are. So what do you want to ask the agencies before you start the process? You want to certainly do some general due diligence. Some of them started, there's a lot of very well-intentioned people out there who have gone through the process themselves as a surrogate or a parent and are starting an agency. They might be very successful. We've seen of new agencies that people love. But you think to yourself, how risk averse are you? How do you feel about it? Ask them how long they've been in practice. Ask them how many people they have. Whether they have some of these services we just mentioned in-house or not. And also, how much experience do they have with people like you, being gay dads, if you're single, if you're binational. All these issues are a little different, from one case to the next. You want to know what kind of experience they have with people like you. And then cost. We'll talk about it several more times, but certainly the agency fees are not the only thing you want to look at. You want to look at some extras as well. We'll talk about them in more detail. Whether they're part of GPAP. We'll explain how you can apply for GPAP, but we have luckily a growing number of providers that are now part of the assistance program. That should be one of the first questions. Even some of the providers here are still not part of GPAP, and you want to, put them on the spot and ask them why. As I mentioned, not just fees, but also the compensation package. We'll drill through the compensation package later on in the afternoon. If they're not providing all the services, what are the costs of the third-party services, and insurance, as well as other potential hidden costs. They're all in our checklist that we'll go over later. And then as far as matching, that is a very typical difference between one agency and the next. You want to at least understand whether that agency first screens before they match, or do they first match before they screen. So there's a shortage of surrogates. That is something very obvious. We see longer and longer waiting times for surrogates across the country. It used to be that agencies took weeks and then 3 to 6 months. Now there are several agencies that would quote you a waiting time, or at least that'll be the reality, of 8 months or more. Those are the agencies that first screen and then match. That means that at the very least, those surrogates have had a questionnaire, of course, that they filled, but they were also interviewed by a social worker. They've gone through some psychological screening, and they also had their medical records summoned such that they could verify that what they said in their applications is true as far as they had prior complications in their, in their previous birth. Obviously, it goes without saying, but maybe I should mention that every single surrogate should have had a child before. So that's why those medical records are very important. So if they've been already screened to that level, perhaps not to the level of actually going to the doctor's office of the fertility clinic and verifying those things, and that's not as necessary because I'm told by most fertility doctors that by the time the medical records have been reviewed, then 90% of the problems have been already eliminated. So that would take several months for them to find you something like that. But then if you like her, she likes you, etc., you're most likely to only need that match and you're on your way. However, other agencies would first get those applications, put all the women whose applications seem okay online and tell you we have surrogates waiting. The truth of the matter is that, and sometimes it works, but the truth of the matter is that the screening rate is oftentimes at least 1 to 10, if not 1 to 30. Which means that you might go to 10 profiles like this online until the woman that you choose would actually pass the screening. So you just want to be aware of that. So when somebody tells you we have surrogates waiting, ask them about that question. And then, of course, when it comes down to it, whether the surrogate that's actually being offered has insurance, applicable insurance, ask them, whether they have some strings attached if you ever wanted to use that surrogate again for a sibling journey. It's a practice that we see less and less, but some agencies would basically require you and the surrogate to pay to go through the exact same process again if you want to work together for a sibling in the future. So even you might not need as much hand-holding, obviously you already paid for the finder's fee, they might ask for the exact same fees or similar fees for the next time around. You might want to at least know that ahead of time. I'm not saying don't work with them, but you want to know about it.